Hey everybody, will this work? Back again, still in the Razorback gear. I think I deserve some credit for showing up last week in the Razorback gear because my Razorbacks won by 3 touchdowns in South Carolina. That was last Saturday, so I'm going to keep it up. It reminds me of a basketball coach from the mid 1980s. Of course, he coached a lot longer than that. But the year that sticks out to me is I believe it was the 1984-85 season. Louis Carnesecca, I believe was his name. He coached the St. John's Redmen to the Final Four that year. They are now called the Red Storm, by the way, but they were the Redmen back then. They went on a big long winning streak, and Coach Carnesecca wore a sweater that became his famous Lucky Sweater. So I'm going to follow his lead. I have a little more liberal understanding of what counts as a lucky item of clothing. It can be a hat, a shirt, socks. I don't think I have any Razorback socks, but I do have Razorback house shoes that I might break out at a future time. But they didn't make the final game. St. John's didn't that year. They made the Final Four, but two other Big East teams did. So let's make that a trivia question. Name those teams in the comment section and you'll get a great big rhetorical pat on the back. Okay, so not here to talk about sports. I'm here to make a qualification or a clarification, a distinction before I sign off for a little while. Now, I know I said I was going to do that already, and I didn't. That's because this thing can get pretty addictive here, so watch out for it. But seriously, we're headed down the stretch run of the semester, so at some point over the long Christmas break, I'll immerse myself again in the YouTube and update myself on the issues that are important to the people I watch and the people that watch me. Okay, Specimen, I know that we've had an exchange on partly on my wall and partly over email. I haven't responded to your most recent email. I'll get to that in due time. Okay, thanks for your patience. So, it seems like every time I have what I think to be an insightful and underappreciated point to make, there are all kinds of clarifications and qualifications you have to make to get there. And sometimes doing this, it just becomes the whole exercise and you never get to the thing you set out to do in the first place. So hopefully that won't happen to me, and if I keep slogging ahead, I'll get there. But for now, like I said, I think this clarification warrants its own video entry. So in my last entry, I talked a little bit about how I think we should distinguish between atheists and agnostics. It's not a hard and fast distinction. There are exceptions. But I pointed out how we're often reminded of what atheism technically means, holding no gods. What I didn't explicitly mention in my last entry was that agnosticism technically means something like lacking knowledge. Okay, so there's no contradiction between holding no God and lacking knowledge. So it doesn't tell us very much. What I think is that there are temperamental dispositions that are starting to cluster among groups of people, and the terms atheist and agnostic pick out those clusters pretty well. Okay, in my last entry, I proposed what I think can serve as a primary distinction between these groups, but I have a little more to say on that. So what prompted this is that recently I was reading over a list of famous atheists, and I came across the name Bruce Lee. Okay, now atheists are not alone in compiling famous people who are members, or I guess who have the characteristic that they want to identify. You see lists of famous Jews, famous Mormons, famous Catholics, famous alumni of certain colleges, so absolutely nothing wrong with it. But when I saw the name Bruce Lee, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Okay, now maybe there's a Bruce Lee scholar or two out there who will want to correct me because I'm not an expert on the man, but I had thought that Bruce Lee was open to certain forms of mystical truth or mystical experience. Okay, might be wrong about that, but very technically, if you want to get technical, I suppose the Buddha is a famous atheist. That's not helpful, right? So what we want to know, and the reason we want to know it before I tell you what I think we want to know, is that the argument between theists and atheists in the contemporary context is not between theist mysticists on the one hand and atheist mysticists on the other. No, the distinction that's important today is between people who are open and people who are closed to mystical forms of truth. Okay, so I can't really come up with simply one term that describes the atheist side of this debate, but there are several. Naturalist, materialist, reductionist, physicalist, okay? All these forms of knowledge and belief are anti-mystical, okay? On the other side, you have theists. You also have some atheists and agnostics who are mystical. Okay, so the primary distinction that we're interested in is not merely between atheists and theists. It's between mysticists and, if you'll allow me one term, naturalists. All right? New atheist, I think, is a term that gets much closer to the target because the new atheists have been pretty clear about what they take to be at least inappropriate ways of forming beliefs and inappropriate ways of viewing the world, okay, that they want to disassociate themselves from. All right, so let's not get hung up. Seriously, if somebody out there has information about Bruce Lee, I would love it. I really don't have the time or inclination to dig into it too much, but even if I'm wrong about Bruce Lee, using too strict relying overly on, say, the etymological origin of a word like atheist can result in categories that are true but misleading. So a list of famous atheists, for example, should not include mysticists. All right, now I've thought a lot about, both in my formal philosophical training and also just on my own, if we categorize things correctly. And this is a very hairy topic. There's certainly nothing false about categorizing, say, the Buddha as an atheist. But I do want to say there's something misleading in our contemporary context because New Atheism is a form of naturalism, or as I said, if you will, reductionism, physicalism, materialism, and the like. Okay? Theism is a form of mysticism. Mystics believe that through subjective experience, even the kind that is not supported and confirmed by science, through our emotional, spiritual, mystical experience, we can come to form true beliefs. Okay? Now, that's a description of a position. If you disagree with that, okay, you're most likely a naturalist. Or one of the other groups I named. Okay, so let's get that clear as we move forward. Okay, this is about scientific naturalism on the one hand versus mysticism on the other. And mystics are not only fundamentalist Christians. Okay, now I'm happy to point out that theists are often confused or misguided on the implications of their belief system and the implications of the belief systems that they disagree with. All right, but let's not get our wires crossed when we move forward and start talking merely about people who believe in God and people who don't, okay, because it's inconsequential. Okay, what's important is whether your worldview is materialistic, naturalistic on the one hand, mystical on the other. Okay? Now, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, you got naturalism, mysticism. Okay? Theism and atheism are interesting, but we have to remember the more important general categories that support these. Okay? Now, I'll see all of you as soon as I can.